Okay, here we go. All right, sorry I was late. Okay, so this is about self-organizing in a decentralized galaxy. And my name is Jamie, and I built this presentation with this really cool framework. Okay, so, a lot of newcomers come to our ecosystem, and it's very difficult to navigate. They don't know where to start. It's just vast. They think there's these starting points, and it's not always the right starting point. And you have these people who know a lot of stuff, but we don't have enough actual navigators building the right maps. The Ethereum Foundation's website hasn't been updated in a long time. And yeah, we need navigators. What's the structure of the universe? What's the structure of our galaxy in this universe? I think you can look at the history, like in astronomy, you trace the history. So you think about the history of what's happened in our community, big players and people like that, you can kind of start to see why it looks like this crazy galaxy. And, obviously the key thing are ideas and proposals. It starts with the white paper, and the white paper gathered so many people together and they just started working on stuff almost immediately. Self-organizing teams. Teams are very independently organized here. And there's personalities, and they collect together and then they disperse, and that's a big factor. And of course, enormous amounts of money are at play in this situation, creating a lot of bright stars in the galaxy. And we are, as we emerge, we have these shared values, and that's a huge factor. Now, if you look at the galactic stew, this is DevCon 0. I mean, this is literally everybody who went to DevCon 0 and the photographer, right? I think. And that's the audience, and they all watched each other give presentations, if you can imagine that. And if you see who's in that photograph, many of the constellations, many of the things that are in our galaxy were led by them as they would start together, and then through the interpersonal conflicts and all the different things, they dispersed and created all kinds of organizations and projects. This is Galactic Stew DevCon 1. And, you could see the audience is much larger now. And again, pretty much everyone in the audience at DevCon 1 started all the, so many projects and institutions in the galaxy. And so what the result are lots and lots of indie teams, and then these, I call it quote-unquote organizations, because the media and many people assume that these are monolithic entities. The Ethereum Foundation did this, Consensus did that, right? I would say that the teams are a lot more powerful than people think or know or understand, and that the teams are just clustered around resources, and they coordinate from there, but they're very loosely controlled. The key thing is that teams do not follow orders. They just don't. It's like pushing string. There's no one pulling strings. I mean, there might be murky people out there with lots of ether. They're pushing strings. They're not pulling strings. I think it's rooted in this mistrust of authority. Decentralization culture, I think, comes from that. It stems from that. And I came up with this phrase, no one is in charge, right? People take responsibility for stuff, but there's no one in charge here. And we keep having to say this on all these forums and Gitter channels, and people come in and are like, who's in charge of this? Who's doing that? And you can direct them to a team that's looking after something, taking responsibility for something. But, it's not like Vitalik is like telling Geth team what to do. It just doesn't work like that at all. So one key thing that comes out of a situation like this galactic cloud kind of thing that we have is the tyranny of structurelessness. And this is a great essay. If you haven't read this essay, look it up. It's just a wonderful thing written. It was written in the 1970s, I believe, and it came out of the feminist movement. And basically, to escape the tyranny of structurelessness, you have these independent teams that adopt their own structures. They're adopting their own policies, and they form protocols. And the key is independent coordination between them. And it's up to the teams to coordinate. And they have to learn how to coordinate. And for me, like when I started analyzing this, it just reminded me of one of my favorite kind of weird topics from college and stuff, cybernetics. I don't see this term used a lot, but it's a really deep term. And what's really ironic is there's a technology called Kubernetes that actually is the root. It's really related to cybernetics. And so I don't want to get divided up into these big realms, but I kind of see like there's control systems, right? And that right there is a control system from, I think it was in Chile. They were going to control the entire economy using this really cool, deluxe 1970s sci-fi looking room. And then you have ants, self-organized systems that they're able to coordinate just with pheromones, right? And so, like an early, the philosophers of cybernetics go way back, but a very important one is Norbert Wiener, and he worked in World War II anti-aircraft systems, and that's where he kind of like came up with the modern cybernetics. And it's the notion of feedback systems, particularly negative feedback systems. The notion of entropy, that everything falls to entropy, he challenged that, saying that information actually leads to a localized difference, a decrease in entropy. And that kind of leads into organizational theory coming out of the 40s and 50s, right? Another philosopher, Hayek, and he came up with a term called catalaxy, which is like voluntary cooperation, and it links into his economics. And he took the cybernetics notion and thought that you can think about price in the economics of pricing in markets, that the price transmits the information. And of course, we all know there's so much more than price, but he reduced it to this, and it really made sense. You can have a self-organized economy in which they're able to achieve great goals just using this one piece of information about a good. Heather Marsh is a very interesting thinker. She was involved with Occupy Wall Street and WikiLeaks, and she came up with this term, I don't even know how to pronounce it, stigmergic society. And it was really interesting, and I'm reading these quotes, and I'm like, this sounds really familiar. It starts with an initial idea, and the project is driven by the idea, not the personality, and no individual needs permission to work on stuff. Like in our community, there's all this work right there. Just get to work, grab it and go, it's yours, right? And people don't understand that. They're like, I want a leader, I want someone to tell me what to do, where do I go? But it's like, take responsibility. You see something interesting, you want to join a team or crew, get involved. We're very open to that. And just grab things and go with it. And here's an interesting difference here. You have no individual needs permission. It's related to competitive, and consensus, cooperative. And it's really interesting, like those dynamics of competition and consensus. Another one is Falkvinge. He was involved with the Pirate Party, and he wrote a really great book, Swarm Wise. I was really excited about the book, and then I read it, and it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, but I thought it was a very good introduction to the idea of swarm organizations. And I don't know if there's anyone from Status here, but I believe Status has adopted this. I keep hearing that they call their teams swarms and things like that. I feel as if they've adopted this philosophy. And so, like, I think there's these attributes of Ethereum teams, like these, what I would consider an ideal Ethereum team. And they have these shared values that we have throughout the community, security or integrity, anti-authoritarianism, productivity, and liveness. These are actually qualities we like in the network, and these are qualities we like in people as well. You have these roles, and there's many other roles besides this, but I will highlight maintainers, because we glorify builders, we glorify organizers, but maintainers like keep a lot of the things running. I'm a maintainer myself, so and philosophers also, like there's an emerging philosopher scene, and I think often in the community we try to reinvent a lot of these things, but we really should at least look in Wikipedia, just browse around Wikipedia. We'll find that
Someone has invented everything we're talking about in governance, basically. Social code. This is very often implicit right now. Like at the Ethereum Magicians, we're trying to be a little bit more explicit about it. But the first three is definitely throughout the Magicians. It's your social code, like what's your mission? I mean, I think a lot of teams understand that part, but what are your principles? Like, how are you doing it? What's guiding you? What principles are guiding you? And principles are really nice because you can, without defining all these specific laws, you can be guided through decisions, saying, oh, you know, we have this deep principle of, you know, like that people can pick up work without permission. So, you know, then you can make a decision about something else, knowing that principle. It simplifies things greatly. You don't have to be specific about everything. And behavior, right? Taking responsibility, managing resources, like that's how it's resource management. That's what all of us are taking responsibility for some piece in the ecosystem. And we're saying that's what I'm going to work on. Doing the work, self-steering, and the key is coordinating with other teams. This is a skill I think is not developed enough. And a lot of people like to just roll with things. They'll pick up something and they're so enthusiastic, they're so smart, they're going to roll with it, they're going to go for it, and they're going to not get too much feedback. And this is like the classic like thing that they talk about in design thinking, right? You should get feedback earlier. You should learn to coordinate and communicate. You should think about like you're going to make a big change in the protocol, or you're going to propose big thing. Think about the stakeholders that are affected by this. That's coordinating behavior. I think that needs to be learned a lot more. And this is it. No one's in charge, right? So take responsibility. Simple as that. Any questions? All right, thanks. You're good to run it? All right. I guess you first.
Yeah, hi, great talk. I loved how you brought all the disparate things together into kind of a narrative. I was curious about the roles that you mentioned. I think it's this last slide, no? Yeah, it's very interesting. And what I was thinking about is the roles, just to make it more concrete, like who are the, like, I understand builders, maintainers. What do you mean organizers? Are like people who organize conference, organize teams?
Yeah.
And also, what about philosophers? Like who are these?
Who are philosophers, yeah. I see philosophers as...
or why, you know.
And why it's so important. And you know, these are just archetypes. These aren't like you need a philosopher on your team. I'm just saying that there should be that quality swirling around in the team.
Just, you can think of some people in the space who you think are kind of like philosophical.
Yeah, I think we tend to be more philosophical than many other fields that I've seen out there. But yeah, the philosopher, it's like somebody who thinks about the deeper meaning, someone who thinks about the impact like of what we're doing in the future. So yeah, there's another question, I think. It's way over here. Hopefully. We need special rows for routing, basically. All right.
First of all, thanks presentation. I really wonder how these shared values appear, who recognize them, have you discussed them, like why those three?
Yeah, for the values. I just threw those up there, but I think, you know, there's a really great little gathering at DevCon 4 in Prague, and it was organized by Rees, who's like one of the big organizers in the event. And basically what we did was, he gave us a bunch of stickies, and he said, what are your personal values? You know, how do you do things? And so we just put them up on the wall, and then first you throw them up on the wall, and then you start to cluster them, so it's a little bit like MapReduce. And you cluster them like ones together, and you can see there's a lot of consistency between all of us who are putting these together. And there's like maybe 15 people from the community, just all random people. And then Rees asked us,
what are the values of Ethereum? Or what are the values of the Ethereum community? And we did the same thing again. And you can see there's a lot of connectivity there. There's a, you know, it's almost like our values were being mapped into what we thought Ethereum was. And there's a lot of commonality there. And these three showed up, and I'm forgetting what the other ones are. Maybe in an updated version of this, I'll put the, I took some photographs of it. So I think that's, you know, if you do exercises, you can find out what those are. But you have to be methodical about it. I think a lot of people do guesswork on this subject for sure. So hopefully it's helpful, yeah.
Hi, that was a great talk, thank you. Yeah. The universe is very inclusive, right? Everyone has a role in it. Yeah. And I'm wondering, how do you see the community kind of expand into the mainstream or the early adapters, which are not so technical, they're not philosophers, they're not maintainers. What are they? They're not evangelists, maybe they're not ambassadors yet, but they're like the crowd which need to onboard into this universe that we're trying to create.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we need to understand those kinds of people who are likely to be the early adopters of it. I think there's a big gap there. And again, it's that assumption making. We need to be scientific about that to find out who they are. My suspicion is that they're a little bit more business-like, like they're people who might want to use some of these technologies for, like, go through a little bit of the pain because it solves such an important problem for them. And so that's my suspicion, is that's the early adopters. I mean, the early adopters for us has been developers, right? dApp developers, and even before that, it's like crypto nerd types. But every expansion of capability gives us more opportunity to onboard people. So I think the next generation is really important to understand who they're going to be. Yeah.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for the great talk.
Hey.
So initiatives such as the Magicians and the Cat Herders have emerged in a very grassroots, I guess, stigmergic fashion. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And sort of seeds were planted by yourself and by others to kind of get these things off the ground, which is awesome. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on other seeds we should be planting now. So philosophers is a great one. Other things for other communities that we might want to see emerge.
Yeah, I think psychology. I think behavioral economics and psychology, and organizational psychology. I think that's a huge gap, is the psychological sophistication to know what users are going to do, or know what people are going to do in these economic situations. Because economics, like, there's a lot of reducing going on, like a lot of, hey, let's talk about it in game theoretics, right? That's really interesting. Good way to check things for security, check things and understand what could happen, crazy scenario kind of things. But behavioral economics has changed the game, right? And this is what people are doing. It's very similar to user experience research, right? So I think psychology, to me, is like the big gap right now. Yeah. I think that's it. We have a consensus on that it's over. Okay. All right.